Okay, so we just did 16, 17, and 18, is that correct? Okay,
Yes.
16, 17, and 18, and an awful lot happened, even though it wasn't necessarily action-oriented, but a lot was revealed and a lot was given to us, I think, to ponder and to chew on. Mary Lou was telling me a few minutes ago before the Zoom started that she was glad that she stuck with it, because after the first chapter, she wasn't sure she was going to like the book. And now she really likes the book, and it reminded me of something that I said early on, to be prepared for this book to feel like it's shifting genres 2 or 3 times. So has that been your experience, where it feels almost like a different kind of book?
Yes. I had the same reaction as Mary Lou when I read the first 3 chapters.
Yeah, as though it were going to be more of like an adventure or suspense story, but then it shifts. It shifts into, you know, more soft science fiction. Now it is shifting into, you know, sort of shifted into philosophy, and now it's kind of shifting theologically as well. And there's just a ton, I think, to take in over these chapters. Basically, these next 3 or 4 chapters is the true heart of the book. The time that Ransom now spends most specifically with it or in the presence of Oyarsa is really kind of where everything culminates, and we start really understanding not just Malacandra, but we sort of get our first glimpses into understanding the wider universe. So this kind of feels like we're working backwards, but I think there is a question to start off with that will then shape everything else that we do. So even though this is something that's revealed quite late, all right, somebody's got something in the background, maybe?
Tom's got his phone call, something from Watson Clinic, I think.
I see. Okay, so let me do, rather than go kind of starting from the beginning of our section and working through it thematically, let me just ask the one question.
Anybody in but the patient.
Was that for us or for Watson
Go
Clinic?
by myself Friday morning.
They're hearing everything you're talking
I
about,
know.
which doesn't have anything to
All
do
right.
with it.
Marion, I'm just going to mute you for a minute so he can make sure and gets his appointment stuff straight.
It's done.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, so after this question, it may just make sure we're on the same page, but then also kind of give us a lot to chew on. Okay. So we've heard a lot about Ransom coming from a planet identified as Thulkandra, the silent planet. And it is silent because no word comes out of Thulkandra, which seems to be unique in our solar system, where the Oyarsa of various planets are able to not just communicate, but almost be in communion with one another. But Thulkandra alone stands silent, and no information goes in or out, and they have really no idea. Even the Oyarsa of Malacandra, who seems so knowledgeable about so many things, does not know or understand Thulkandra. So here's my one question to see if we're all on the same page. Thulkandra has an Oyarsa. Who is the Oyarsa of Earth? No.
I didn't hear the end of your question.
It's Lucifer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Oyarsa of Earth is Lucifer.
Yeah. I think he referred to him
As the bet one. Again, using that language that we've seen Ransom try to develop first with the Frost, that how do you describe evil or wicked or sin to creatures that have no concept of that, and the best he can come up with is bent. And so Oyarsa describes the ruler, the spiritual ruler of Thulkandra as the bent one. And he even makes an allusion to a war where this Oyarsa, who is so bright and full of light, wants power and dominion, and a war is waged while Earth itself was still in its formative stages. So this will become a little more clear a little bit later, but I think it's worth just unpacking. Oyarsa is not a name, it's a title. So Oyarsa just basically means the ruling spiritual power of a world. And as you'll see later, and I'm sort of jumping ahead, but who Ransom is speaking to as Oyarsa could very easily simply be called Malakandra itself. He's not the planet, but the ruling power of every planet, if you're on that planet, you would refer to as Oyarsa. Like, let's say it means boss, you know. So if I'm working for one company, I might say, hey, boss. But if I go to a different company, I might call the employer of that company boss. So anyway, I just wanted to see if we were all on the same page here.
Yeah.
To start understanding the wider implications of why Earth is referred to as Thulkandra and silent, and what that kind of means for Ransom and really for all of us. So how did that revelation hit you as you were kind of digging into chapter 18?
I was thinking of the war that existed between Michael the Archangel and Lucifer as part of that picture.
Right. Yeah, and I think that was very purposeful.
I was sitting here a minute ago thinking about that. I'm glad you said it. But
Yeah, so why, now, this is taken, you know, the fall of Lucifer, which is only very obliquely referred to in scripture. You know, these are more extra biblical either traditions or stories or explanations. You know, in scripture itself, it's just a handful of scattered passages that you have to kind of make sense of and put together. But if it is, you know, kind of a classical understanding of the pride of Lucifer, you know, better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven, as Milton would put it. Why is Lucifer confined to Earth? What happens to make this war occur? What are the consequences of Lucifer's pride? Right, banished, which is a big deal because as Oyarsa keeps trying to explain, and Ransom can never really wrap his head around, Oyarsa is on Malakandra, but he's not on Malakandra. He's in fellowship and communion with the others while he is also there speaking with Ransom. And that's kind of beyond our practical understanding. But to be banished from that means to be genuinely separated out in a very fundamental way.
he keeps referring to heavens.
Yes.
And that's still, I still am not real adjusted to that. But that's where all these.
That's right, in the heavens. And so there's some, you know, philosophy and there's some theology all kind of tied in there. But it's basically saying what we refer to as space, as a sterile, empty vacuum, is actually filled with the presence of God and with sort of the unseen forces that we don't really comprehend, and could be referred to as the heavens, in both a space is filled with these Eldila, but also in just kind of like maybe even if we were to talk about the crossing and the intersection of various dimensions, there's just, this is worlds within worlds, and how we all have this almost unarticulated sense looking up on a starry night and feeling that what is above us is full and not empty. And that's really been the way, I think, maybe from every human who has ever looked skyward. A sense and a feeling of the fullness of what is above us and not the emptiness.
There's a lot more out there than we.
Right. So this is in many ways a very medieval cosmology of the heavens, which C.S. Lewis, as a medievalist, would have not only been very professionally well acquainted with, but he's using kind of his creativity and literary skill to pull some things back into even a present and modern understanding, where we can say, oh, well, we know now through astrophysics that space is a vacuum and that Mars is uninhabited and blah, blah, blah. Well, he kind of has an answer for all of this that puts pieces back together. Just because we can't see or perceive something doesn't mean it's not there. And even Mars itself, when astronomers were first able to construct telescopes that allowed them to see the surface of Mars, it was first recorded with kind of two major characteristics. One was the color. That's why it's always been referred to as the red planet. And the other was, anybody remember? Well, sort of.
Old.
Canals.
Canals.
Oh, okay.
Canals. So we had like these, Renaissance astronomers describing what they referred to. I mean, I think they're married Italians, and it was canali, and which may or may not have been a mistranslation. But basically, from then on, there's been this, it's kind of built into the folk understanding of Mars that there are canals. Well, if there are canals, then there must have been water, and so on and so forth. And so this book takes this kind of medieval cosmology and it ties it into more modern scientific understandings. We would say that we can observe through the through the Mars rovers and through our telescopes, that the surface of Mars is barren and uninhabitable. What would this book say about the surface of Mars?
It has mountains and valleys and.
Well, that the surface itself, though, is barren and uninhabitable.
Right.
But those same canals that they saw in telescopes are actually deep fissures that lead to a place of warmth and water and all the things of life. But kind of getting back to the earlier question, why is Mars sterile and uninhabitable? Was it always that way?
No, in earlier life, humanity lived there, but they all died.
And he sees in some of these carvings representations of the surface of Mars with its birds and trees and creatures he doesn't recognize. So why aren't they there anymore? And Oyarsa says, these are so old you don't understand. They look old now, but these are actually copies of copies of copies of copies.
They've implied that there was a cold that removed everyone and
Yes.
everything.
And do you remember where that came from?
No,
Didn't Lucifer or
Earth's
Yes,
Oyarsa calls it.
that's right. So remember, he says this is part of what caused the war. In his pride and in his domination and desire to control, he says something like, with his right hand, he struck the moon, and with his left, he struck my planet. And it basically devastated the surface of the planet. And Maleldil opened up the fissures of Mars with its vents and hot springs and cracks and everything else, so that the living creatures could still survive, but by going basically underground, which is what Ransom has really experienced. He's not experienced the surface of Mars, he's experienced the inside. And it was really that event that seemed to have necessitated the war in heaven and caused Lucifer to be chained within the airs of our own world and cut off from the communion and fellowship of all the others.
Does that tie back to Adam and Eve?
Ah, does it? Can you tie it back?
Well, my thought was that that would be the moment that they ate from the forbidden tree. And then they were shamed and hid from God from then on.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of a mystery. Do those moments intersect, or does Lucifer being chained to our world simply allow that interaction with Adam and Eve to occur at some point? So Oyarsa indicates that Mars is a far older world than Earth, that it kind of lived and died really before Earth was fully formed. And a lot of this is very heady stuff, that you have to kind of absorb and make sense of. But we don't have figures and dates and things. And there's even this passing reference about not being so concerned about numbers. Oyarsa himself it might be the close of 18, but basically, that his children don't concern themselves with numbers, because when you do, you sort of miss the forest for the trees. And so if Ransom wants to know, well, did this happen 60 million years ago, or did this happen 20,000 or whatever? And Oyarsa just kind of waving that off, like, you're kind of asking the wrong questions. You're focusing on the wrong things. And by this point, Ransom has been so fully humbled that he's come back around to just being open and honest. And if he's corrected on something, he simply receives it. That in and of itself, I think, is worth pondering for a moment. We have seen on a few occasions Ransom's shame and humiliation, whether it was his mistakes or simply being ashamed of the fact that he's a part of a bent humanity. But something kind of neat happens. And being in front of Oyarsa with all of these other, now the Thifiltrigi and the Sorns and the Prasa and they're all kind of all lined up. And he's there in the presence of all the Eldila who are all gathered around, and he's there all by his lonesome. He kind of makes a metaphor there. What's the metaphor? How did that scene strike you? Can you think of a metaphor?
Well, someone who's on trial.
Yes, I think that's what it was. Like he has this very sense of being on trial. But it's not just him. He's sort of a proxy. Isn't it really the trial of humanity?
Right.
And he's basically, he starts off with a sense of, this growing dread and a shame, because he knows now in the presence of such an overwhelming spiritual force that he's really kind of nothing. But something kind of neat happens, I think, where he has been so thoroughly humbled, he's sort of come back around, and the shame is in a sense gone. He's able to speak to Oyarsa very plainly and very openly, and there's a back and forth, and when there's a problem or something bad, he just admits it. And even if he's like, you know what, could you please kill us 3 humans? Because that would, you know, this world must be protected from us. And it's a very matter of fact kind of thing. And there is something remarkable about not just experiencing shame, but going all the way through it until, in essence, you have been cleansed. The best thing that I can think of, and this is going to sound very, very indirect and very sideways, but I don't know of a better it's common, and you're all the way back to the Eden story, common in humanity, the shame of nakedness. But there comes a point, either if you've had to be naked for a long time, or perhaps the nakedness and the intimacy with your spouse, where it's no longer shameful, it simply is. It's like you come back full circle. We're shy, we're timid, we're embarrassed, but then at some point, having been fully accepted, that shame sort of subsides. There's kind of a silly show on Discovery Channel or whatever we watched a few years ago, Naked and Afraid, and they take 2 survivalists, a man and a woman, and they dump them in a desolate location for 30 days, and with like a film crew, and they have to, you know, find ways to survive. And I mean, they blur out all of it, but the idea is, I mean, they have to be kind of okay with it in order to sign up for it, but pretty much everyone is sort of embarrassed early on, but after day 5 or 6 or day 10, it's just, you don't even think about it anymore. And so I just got this impression that before Oyarsa, at some point, the shame that he felt was just, it was gone, but not in a sense of he forgot, but it was almost like its purpose was fulfilled. So it now wasn't this pressing problem. Is that making any sense? Mm-hmm. He was now able to simply speak plainly and frankly without any kind of internal judgment. Should I say that? Should I not say that? Am I embarrassed about this? Do I feel good about this or bad about this? He just simply spoke whatever he knew. No more.
Like a weight, yeah, like a weight was lifted off his shoulders.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I was also reminded of something. It was like a parenting seminar or something that I heard many was ago. But it was a guy who this is not all he did, but he was a defender of corporal punishment. It was kind of incorporated within this larger framework of things. And so it kind of made it unpopular, but what he said was, small children are not well equipped to carry guilt and shame. And they need something to know that it's over. So they've been caught or they've been told, you know, don't do this, and they do that, and they're in trouble. And by sending them to timeout or by saying, I forgive you, or it's okay, they're just not quite developed enough to not carry it around for a while. So he said, when you had a punishment, it's never done out of anger. It's just, you know, the physical consequence, because then it's done. that it was actually beneficial in a sense of they knew that like they had paid their debt to society, I guess. The crime was complete. And they were sort of cleansed in a way because they could walk away knowing that the slate had been wiped clean. They paid for it and it was done. It wasn't going to be hung over their heads or anything like that. And I'm not advocating corporal punishment. I'm just saying it reminded me of the description that it sort of felt like Ransom, he kind of paid the price for his humanity, in his fear, in his shame, but now it was done. And there was just something kind of really interesting about that. Now, it seems like kind of a funny place that we began at the end. So I do want to back up, and I just want to hit a little bit in these other chapters that we read, but I just thought it was worth making sure that we were on the same page about some of the implications of what we learned. So when we started off on 16, we are still in the house of Aubrey, and he's really getting to know the Sorns for the first time. And he has kind of a funny little interaction. So far, he has gotten this sort of three-part sentient creature perspective, but only from the Harasa. And now he's getting the same identification, but from a different perspective from the Sorn. And there's this great little passage, do you remember it, where Aubrey talks about how the Harasa would have never invented the oxygen canister?
Yes.
And it
He
wasn't
says
because
that-
they're stupid.
They
Why?
like best the making of things that are only good to look at and of no use.
Well, that would be the Fiffle-Triggy who actually built the thing. So the Sorn had to kind of come up with the idea. There should be a way to, mitigate the atmosphere. They give it to the Fiffle-Triggy who figure out how to make it work. But the Harasa never would have done that, and they would have been quite content for Ransom to choke in the atmosphere and die. Why? Because they're mean? Or
No.
stupid?
No.
They would just written it in poetry as an experience.
They're right, like the grand adventure that ended tragically, and the Sorns, the practical ones, were like, wouldn't it be better if he didn't die? And it was another fun little revelation about these three creatures, how they work together, not just to fill in the gaps of one another, but their fundamental differences of perspective fit to make a broader whole. None of them are wrong. It's just without the other two, there would be this really missing component.
Interesting too, how they all respect each other's strengths and talents. And, they, even when he said that the Harasa were too stupid to come up with this, he also balanced that with, but they write poetry and they just seem to have a respect for each other's ability to do something other than what their strength is.
Right. Well, I would say he doesn't call them stupid. He just basically says they never would have thought about it.
Yeah.
They don't think about such things. They don't worry about that, but somebody has to. Now, interestingly enough, this mutual respect that they have for each other and the mutual interdependence pops up in a real interesting way in Meldalore, where Ransom gets his first time to see all three independent species interacting together. And he notices for the first time Malachondran humor. He saw it with the Harasa because he lived with them for so long. But what do they mostly joke about when they're all together? Do you remember that? they poke fun at each other. Most of their humor in groups tended to be about their differences. Now, we can do that, and we, humans do that all the time. But it always seems like you can take it too far and cause a problem very easily, right?
Risky.
Yeah, yet there seems to be no risk on Malacandra. So perhaps the humor of poking fun at differences is not wrong. We just don't seem to be able to do it without causing wrong. And that's a funny little thing to think about in the sense of whenever theologically it comes up, is anger sinful? You can go back to Jesus clearing the temple. If he doesn't sin, but he's angry, doesn't that mean that anger can be done without sin? By logical extension, the answer should be yes. Well, why can't I seem to be angry without sinning? Well, it's not the fault of anger itself. Whose fault is it? Well, it's mine. Yeah, it's my fault. It's not, it's a tool. And the hammer can be used to build a home, or it can be used to hit somebody in the head. So even humor differences seems to be a tool that is not in and of itself a bad thing. And if the right people use it, it seems to be a part of the way they enjoy each other. And I don't know, that one caught my eye, and I thought about that for a minute. All right.
Humans joke about our differences. We tend to have at least a grain of mean-spiritedness about it,
Yes.
as opposed to just observational.
Right. But if there's no mean spirit to begin with, then you can't have a mean-spirited intention. And I would say there's something else that's also missing in Malacandra, or perhaps you could describe it as missing in us. And that is when joking turns hurtful, it's virtually always out of insecurity. Sometimes the insecurity of the person, the joke is at my expense and I'm insecure and it hurts my feelings. But it can also be the insecurity of the person making the joke. That's why it becomes mean-spirited. Because I'm insecure about something in me, so I'm going to make a joke about you to make me feel better about me. Is there anyone on Malacandra who's insecure? They seem to know exactly who they are and are perfectly content with that at all times. Yeah, ransom, less than, and divine are the only three creatures of any insecurity on all of Malacandra. And they had to be imported from the silent planet. And there's just something that's really beautiful about that. So by extension, we have learned something, not just about Malacandra, but about those species. It's been hinted at, it's been sort of spoken of in, kind of a offhanded sense. But the implication is this: Malacandra never fell. There is no Eden story of Malacandra. There is no fall and brokenness of a world or of a spirit or of a humanity. These are creatures who never experienced the fall.
I think that's because of the Oyarsa not falling, or because maybe there's a tree of knowledge and life on Malacandra that they never touched.
Well, we're not given the deep history of Malacandra. We're given, kind of its well mature, if not closer to the end of its story than its beginning. So the mechanism of it not falling, I don't think we know. But we can't, but if Earth is so notable in the heavens because it did fall, what does that say about the other worlds? Well, they didn't. And so if you start thinking about, well, why are these creatures able to work with each other so contentedly? Why are these three completely different creatures able to be so cooperative? How can they joke about each other and not get angry, or one of them try to be the boss of the others? How can they be so content and secure with themselves? This world never fell. That's why the best that Ransom can do to explain sin and wickedness is this concept of bent. It's not that they're stupid, and it's not that they're naive. It's never occurred. And think again, by implication, they are able to see the El Deal. They are able to interact with Oyarsa. There is this openness, not just to the physical world, but to the spiritual realities. And maybe that's an extension of never having fallen. Think back to the Eden story. God is in Eden with Adam and Eve. As a matter of fact, when they hide, there's God is in the garden with Adam and Eve, and where are you? And this conversation seems to happen in his presence. I mean, whatever that looks like and means, but kind of from that moment on, isn't there a distance? Isn't there some kind of separation that we don't see here in Malacandra? We had to get back, Ransom's walking with the Aubrey, and it's just sort of kind of some neat things about how comfortable it was, surprisingly comfortable. And anything from that like 16, 17 that you kind of made a note of, or you're sort of thinking about?
That when Oyarsa asked Ransom what here.
Well, I mean, back in 16, 17, back before he's actually meeting and speaking with Oyarsa. So the journey to Melville, and as he first gets there, anything from those, I don't want to completely skip over them. I mean, there's stuff to talk about, but it's all getting kind of melded together with sort of the bigger issues.
Well, he realizes that the Adelas, I guess is how you pronounce it,
Yeah.
are everywhere,
Yes.
and that maybe they were on Earth. He just wasn't aware of them.
Right.
So he's expanding, it appeared that he was expanding the possibilities that he had limited in his previous life of coming there.
Now, these Eldila that he is seeing, these creatures of light, these spiritual beings, have they been on Volcandra?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Not since it's been closed off to them. Ever since Lucifer has been chained to the earth, remember that planet is cut off. Not even Oyarsa knows what goes on that world. They are, basically it's sort of sealed off. So those Eldila, which might be in fellowship and communion on these other planets, are not in fellowship and communion with ours. But let me raise a possibility. This is not in the book. Let me raise a possibility. Could there be Eldila of a different sort on Volcandra?
Yes.
Okay. Because it's closed off and cut off from the rest of the heavens, what kind of Eldila might be on such a world?
Bent ones.
Say that again.
Bent ones.
Bent ones.
Demons serving Lucifer.
So if we have maybe a rough analog, just with words we might be familiar with, let's call, okay, well, first of all, let me just, a real quick theological check-in, okay? The nature of the universe is not dualistic, that light and dark and evil and good are not counterbalanced, okay? Light and good, that's what's real and true, and anything that is dark or a shadow, it's a perversion, it's a twisting, it's a lack of that. They're not 50-50, all right? It's more like a hole and then holes poked in the hole. If there's like an equivalent adversary to Lucifer, it is not Jesus. Okay, so there's some Christian heresies that are like, oh, Jesus and the devil, they're like they're brothers, or they're Jesus and the devil, they're like fighting it out and they're arm wrestling. No. Jesus and Lucifer are on no terms equivalent beings. Who's the best equivalent being to Lucifer?
Well, we thought that the angel Michael.
The archangel Michael. That's a much better analog as far as like if we're trying to make some comparisons. Okay, so if Lucifer is equivalent to an archangel, Lucifer is the Oyarsa of earth. Perhaps the Oyarsas are roughly equivalent to archangels. So what would the Eldila be like?
Angels.
Angels. And what might we call a bent angel? We've got a name for them in English.
Demon?
We call them demons. So perhaps there are Eldila on this silent world, but they're bent. Can't see them. Doesn't mean they're not there. A
Maybe I'm
spiritual
reading-
reality. Say that again.
I was gonna say, maybe I'm reading into it too much. You're trying to compare to the earth that I know, but so there's no good angels on earth?
Yeah, that's what I'm.
All right, so I'm pushing it further than the book is allowing to. Okay, so we're going to have more information about this. I just want some of these implications to start seeping in. All right, so you're going to get more. So we have hint of more. Okay, we're going back into deep into 18 because Oyarsa says something has happened on Falcandra that he has heard rumors of, but he knows nothing about. Do you remember anything that he said about that? Because some of these passages are very provocative.
I remember them doing that, or him saying that, and I thought that he said that he had sent Sorens, is that what, or is there a C in it? Can't find it right at the moment. But you said that they had never entered Earth, so Sorens.
The Sorens definitely are bound to Malacandra, but the Eldila of Malacandra, these spiritual beings of light, these little angels, have not gone back and forth into Thulcandra, the silent planet, because they don't know what's going on.
I thought he said he had sent them, and I can't find where it says it now, but that he had sent them, but they were unable to speak or communicate in any way.
Here we go.
But obviously
Well,
I'm wrong.
This explains things I've wondered at, said Oyarsa. As soon as your journey had passed your own air and entered heaven, my servants told me that you seemed to be coming unwillingly, and the others had secrets from you. I did not think any creature would be so bent as to bring another of its own kind here by force. So it seems to me that even if there are things that they can see and observe about Earth, they are not present in an active way on Earth. And even the Eldila don't really know what's happening very well until he gets out of our atmosphere. Like once he's in the spaceship, there seems to be some interaction there. There's a passage that bears thinking through.
I'm not sure whether this is what I'm looking for or not. He was talking about the trip with Weston and Divine. He explained apparently that Weston and Divine had come before.
Yes,
They feared the Sorn.
right.
They were unteachable.
Yeah, so he basically gives an account and fills in some of the information that that Ransom did not know. So a couple of years ago, Weston and Divine first make this journey. Now, Oyarsa and Zeldiel understand what's happening as soon as they leave the atmosphere of Earth. But he just watches them. And they land on Mars. And what do? What do Weston and Divine do?
They collect blood.
What is sun's blood? That's the Malacandran word for what?
Gold.
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 And there's another one, stars, tears, which I have a feeling might be like diamonds or something. I don't know. That one's not explained. But basically something like some kind of precious element.
Well, he talked about, he was trying to get Weston and Divine to come to him. And they didn't do that.
Right. So Oyarsa, because he doesn't know what's going on in Thalkandra, takes a very benign view of this. And it's interesting. And so sends envoys, first of Eldila, who they completely ignore, probably because they don't see him, don't understand. And then he sends Sorns. And how much progress do the Sorns make with them?
Not much.
Yeah, very little, very little. But it does get across that Oyarsa wants to see them.
They left and returned to Earth by thinking that Oyarsa wanted to eat them.
Yeah, right. So again, bad minds only see bad motivations. And being summoned to Oyarsa to them was so ominous that they had to cook up a plan to save their own skins. What's their plan?
They brought Ransom to send into as a sacrifice or whatever.
Right. So, but it wasn't gonna be Ransom, was it? How did the story begin? It was gonna be that boy. Ransom was kind of a happy accident to them.
Yeah.
They were planning on bringing that boy and sending him to Oyarsa. Let this mysterious creature eat the kid that we don't care about. But basically because they were so unwilling to listen or cooperate, they were told you can't take any more gold until you come see me. So their plan was, well, we'll just bring back a third person and send that person as the sacrifice so we can keep collecting gold.
It's a good thing they kidnapped a philologist.
Yeah, right. So
Ransom answered his two questions about the Weston and Divine. That he hadn't, Oyarsa hadn't understood what they were doing.
That's
what they
right.
were wanting.
sure. Well, I mean, and then again, think about that from a non-fallen world. Why would these guys be picking up gold? Because, Ransom even has to explain why gold is important to them. And he basically says you can trade it for power or pleasure or whatever. And so just the motivation is foreign to all of them. Like, why would you be so consumed with picking up these rocks?
And the other part, I didn't write that. He said the other one means to harm your people. That would have been Weston.
Yes. Divine is a greedy little so-and-so who would sell his mother for $1. And he's the one interested in gold. Weston has a different purpose. You remember Weston's purpose as explained, and Ransom kind of explains it here again, that man must conquer other planets and continue outward for the sake of continuing humanity. And Ransom says basically, he wants humanity to continue forever. So just leap from planet to planet, absorb the resources, and when it's sucked dry, build another one so that humanity itself can live forever. And obviously, Oyarsa's response to that is basically they don't understand. Worlds don't live forever. Species don't live forever. It is in the will of Malelbil. It is in the will of God. So I'm not going to say we can dispense with the names because the names actually mean something and they're going to mean more. But sometimes to start making the translations now, Malelbil is God. And if these Oyarsas are like archangels or angelic powers, so he says, Ransom is saying, look, Weston and Divine can harm your people. You've got guns and stuff, and so it's better to just kill us all. And Oyarsa responds, the least of my servants could touch their ship before it reached Malacandra while it was in heaven, making a body of different movements. For you, no body at all. Basically, we could destroy them at any time. Be sure that no one of your race will come to my world ever again unless I call them. So basically, this has all been permitted to happen. Weston and Divine see themselves as either brave adventurers or conquering scientific heroes. But all of this has happened with the permission of Oyarsa. But now that permission is rescinded. And they're never again going to make that journey, no matter what kind of sophisticated spaceship they build. It's never going to be permitted again unless he chooses, because now he knows what they're after. But enough of this. Now tell me about Falcandra. Tell me all. We know nothing since the day when the bent one sank out of heaven into the air of your world, wounded in the very light of his light. So that's why I'm kind of getting to what's happened on Earth has been separated out from the rest of these archangels and heavenly powers. They don't know. And Ransom's about to explain when they get interrupted, and that's kind of our cliffhanger at the end of the chapter. So I'm not going to say there are no angels on our Earth, and that explanation is going to get worked out. We've got a few chapters left, but there's some implications here that we are cut off from the heavens in a way that other planets are not. But even Oyarsa has said there are rumors that Malelbil has contested for Falcandra. What that has looked like, what it means, even Oyarsa, who seems like this almost omnipotent spiritual power, not quite, but almost, Oyarsa has no clue and is eager for Ransom to explain to him about the Earth. So if the last thing that Oyarsa knows is that Lucifer has been banished to Earth and Earth has been silent ever since, what are some big things that Oyarsa does not understand? God has contested versus Lucifer, but I don't know anything about it.
Jesus?
He doesn't know about the incarnation. He is this, again, almost omniscient, omnipotent, like the powers of Oyarsa already seem way beyond us, right? But he knows nothing about what God did after the garden, or at least after the fall of Lucifer. Everything that's happened since, they are all completely ignorant. They've heard rumors, and they really want to know. And it's going to be up to Ransom to try to explain it. And there's just this, I think, a very profound implication of the silence of this earth being cut off from the heavens. Does that mean it's cut off from God? I would say absolutely not. And we're going to see how and why. And that's where maybe there are angelic LDL of the earth, but they don't interact with the LDL of the other planets. So if they're LDL on earth, they're not always demons. But I was just kind of suggesting, a spiritual reality all around earth that we who live on earth don't notice. But we know that after the fall of Lucifer, or even after the fall of humanity, God was not done with earth. But these guys don't know that. And that's going to be how the book, starts finishing, is trying to explain that and what its implications will be. Anything else?
Oh, right there at the very end, there was a procession
Mhm.
coming toward him when they were carrying something.
Carrying something, yeah, that's kind of
That's all about.
that's kind of the cliffhanger
Mhm.
of our chapter. He's just about to explain to Oyarsa, and then they're interrupted. Now, we have chapters 19 through 22, and then there is a postscript, and the postscript is about the length of a chapter. So the question is, how do we want to finish this out?
Do it all. I don't want it to end.
So without putting people on the spot, how are you liking the book now?
I like it.
Okay.
What if we do 19 and 20 and then one more week for 21 in the postscript?
Okay. So 19 and 20, and then one more week to do 21, 22 and postscript.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so the one last thing to put the bug in your ear, and it's really interesting, Sam, that you asked me a question earlier that you phrased it the way that you did.
Uh-oh.
Because
Oops.
there's no pressure in this, none at all. Because this book is kind of an acquired taste, and it could have been that people decided this was interesting, but I still didn't like it, right? Or I'm done now. You asked Sam, how did Malacandra not fall? What was their process? And
Right.
I basically alluded to the fact that we don't know. And even by the end of the book, you won't know. It just never happened. They were always in this kind of, just sort of blissful, cooperative fellowship from the beginning. But it's a very, very, very old world that basically lived its lifespan before Earth really fully began. And think of it in terms of our sun as a yellow star is kind of a middle-aged star, but a red giant would be sort of an elderly star. And there's stars that are younger than our sun, but it goes through a life cycle, right? But those are life cycles of these really huge numbers. There is a second book.
And a third.
Well, yeah, but the second book, Paralandra, is about a different planet. And it's about a planet where the fall is in the balance. Will Paralandra fall or not? So if Mars is an old planet that settled this issue a long time ago, and Earth is kind of in the middle, where we chose the fall, and we're still dealing with implications, Paralandra will be a world where the choice of the fall is going to happen right in front of us.
Looking forward to that one.
If you are interested in continuing. And I won't say which planet Paralandra is. You'll have to figure that out. Okay. So anything else? Well, this story will definitely end. We'll get to the end of it, and we might just be satisfied, like, yep, that was great, we're good, we're done. But just in case, I tossed that out because this is about the time in any book study where we start talking about what's next.
What about the third book?
Completely different.
Yeah.
Oh, it does. It does, but it's a completely different kind of book. If we want to keep working through, we can. I just wanted to throw that out because, like I said, this is about the time where we start talking about what's next. And we've actually moved very quickly through this book. Okay, we good?
We're good.
All right, well, I will see you guys next time, and we will do 19 and 20.
20.
All right.
Bye.
Right, thank you.
Bye.